Because I was so burnt out, I was like, I have to figure this out. I have to figure out how to automate this thing because I don't really like this business that much, to be honest with you. From then, I just started building out the team. I hired that coach to coach me through how to automate my business. And within 4 years, I was able to completely step out of the business. And it's actually easier to manage the business from here than it is from there. Reason being is that when you manage it from afar, you can't be in the weeds, right? You can't meet with sellers, you can't meet with tenants, you can't go to properties and start nitpicking stuff. I just see the high level overview of everything that's going on in the business, and I can make decisions based on those high level things as opposed to all the little things that I don't need to know about or I don't want to know about, because those things will just clog your mind and get you really upset because they're not going the way you want them to.
Welcome to the Venue RX. On this show, we document and share best practices around owning, operating, and managing world-class wedding venues.
Tony, welcome to the Venue RX in person. Thanks so much for coming.
Absolutely. I'm just down the road, so this is perfect.
Yeah, this was really cool. When we were first talking and a mutual friend introduced us, and he said you were in Carlsbad, I was like, okay, we have to have you come in. And we rarely, for the viewers, we rarely get to do in-person stuff. So this is a really cool opportunity. I'm curious, give me a little bit of an origin story on yourself, because you have a real estate background with some pretty impressive stats in terms of like the amount of flips that you've done and kind of where you've taken the real estate industry. But how did you get, or your real estate career, but how did you get into the venue space?
Yeah, so first of all, I started 2001 in real estate investing. So that's kind of how the investing started. I bought an info product on TV called No Down Payment by Carlton Sheets.
Okay.
I'm sure you probably heard of it.
Yeah. No, I've heard of Carlton Sheets.
He was the OG of education. So a long time ago, he started infomercials back in, I think it was the 80s. So that's evolved over the years into a couple other businesses. And so back in 2017, I already had a building that I had my company in. We were flipping houses, doing rentals and all that kind of stuff. And I've always been a vision guy, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to have like a bigger building. We could lease out part of the building and then cover our rent and have a good, much bigger investment. So I find this 17,000 square foot building on a major highway that was dilapidated because they had just redone the highway. So when they redid the highway, it was all torn up for like a good 5 years. So all those buildings just got run down. And then once they got the highway done, then it's like, okay, then people started buying up the buildings. So I bought this building, 70,000 square feet, took my business, my real estate investing business, and put it into 3,000 square feet. So I had 14,000 square feet left over. So I'm like a visionary. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with this? So the easy thing would have been lease it out to somebody. But me being an entrepreneur and a visionary, I thought, you know what, let's create a co-working space out of this, right? So we developed this whole plan and this whole vision, and we had this big 8 or 9 car bay in the back that used to be for auto, because this was a car dealership.
Yeah.
And so people would pull around to the back, pull their cars in. And so I was like, man, this would be cool to put nice glass doors in. You could pull up and just have this venue, and there's 2 acres of parking out in the back, and just had this whole vision. So we spent a lot of money because it was just a rough shell. I mean, I'd love to show you before and after pictures sometime, but we just built it all out. Took us, a year. It was supposed to take like 9 to 12 months. It took like at least a year and a half. And we were going to spend, I think, just under $1 million on it. Ended up being 1.5.
Okay.
So that was my big, okay, I'm really good at residential real estate. This is my first big thing into commercial real estate. And so that's how it started. Then we opened up 1 month before COVID hit.
Oof.
So we had 30 days to basically fill some offices, get some co-working memberships, started showing the venue, and people have to plan, so you don't usually get venue bookings right off the bat. So I think maybe we had a couple, and then boom, we get shut down. So that's kind of how the venue started and how I got into the venue space.
So Tony, I'm curious, so it sounds like it took longer and it cost more money, which I think is kind of a common theme in any sort of construction or things like that. I'm curious about the permitting side of it and the actual like putting the venue together. Is that what took a long time, or was it that the vision kept evolving? Like what specifically kind of pushed that timeline and maybe added to the expense?
That's a great question. So this is Wichita, Kansas, right? So we live in California. Wichita, Kansas is where the venue space is, where I was born and raised. And it was a combination of probably 2 to 3 different things. One, the design does take a while. So you're changing things and you're, like, oh, this looks good. And then wait, no, let's change it. So that's one aspect. Permitting wasn't that bad. Wichita, Kansas, you can get permits pretty quickly. Even for a big commercial building like that, I think it probably took 2 to 3 weeks, maybe. That same building would probably take at least 6, if not 12 months, if not maybe longer in California.
Yeah.
So where you permit is obviously a big deal. But I think really the main thing was contractor issues. We had a contractor, we're actually still in litigation right now. We had a contractor that talked us into doing, instead of a central air system, the split system, which is like zoned, which is great in theory.
Yeah.
If you know how to put them in. Well, this is probably his second job ever putting it in, and this is like a several $100,000 job, and they messed up so many things. And so they didn't put a fresh air system in, which is kind of like a fancy way of saying like a return air system. And so they didn't bid that in the project, and they didn't get approval for anything they did. And so when they went to collect the final bill, I said, okay, where's the final stamps and everything from the city? And they're like, well, we never got them. I'm like, you're kidding me. And so then they filed a lawsuit against me because I owed them 10 grand.
Yeah.
And then find out they didn't do the stamp from the city. And then we went back.
Probably intentionally to avoid having to have them look at that wasn't correctly put together?
Well, I don't know. They were pretty silly for filing that lawsuit because I think I might have let it go. I would have just let them walk away and just gone in the other direction. But then we started digging deeper, and it's like we had to go get bids from other companies, and we had to spend $60,000 just on the system they didn't put in. They were supposed to. Then we found out they didn't put enough units in. They put a bunch of units in, but the plans that they put together didn't coincide with how many units they put in. And then stuff started breaking, and now we're like, I think we're at least $150,000 what we've spent over what they had bid us to put in what they didn't put in, and then to fix the things that they messed up. And it's still ongoing.
Okay.
So this is like, God, this is a good 2 years later. So we have, anyway, I hate talking about court and litigation, but it happens.
Part of it, yeah.
Yeah, and so we go to court later this year on that.
Could you help me understand a little bit more about your real estate business? Because, I mean, I've done a little bit of research and just what I know from the introduction, but for anyone who's listening to this first-time introduction to you, kind of where did the real estate stuff come from? Even take us further back, right, before the venue.
Yeah, so 2001, I was waiting tables. I was in college, saw a late night infomercial, bought it, $200 course on TV. Those things you can now find online on YouTube, which I think is great for people to get started today.
What was the drawback then? Like, was it you wanted a way out of waiting tables? Was it kind of the post-college plan?
I think it's two things. One is I used to buy a bunch of stuff on TV at that time.
Okay.
Like just random stuff. Like my wife still makes fun of me to this day because I'll buy like gadgets and stuff like that. But seeing this, I was in college. I played college football, so I was just transitioning into business. And I saw this and I'm like, okay, wow, these people are like, I've got 100 rental properties making $10,000 a month cash flow, and it's throwing all these numbers, right? That was my big exposure to good marketing, like really good testimonials. And so I'm like, these look like normal people. I bet you I could maybe figure this out. So I just $200, I'm guessing I had maybe $1,000 in my checking account at that time. So it's decent investment when you look at it. And I got the book and I literally got obsessed, and the whole weekend I just studied it and looked at it. And then I think it was the next week I started making phone calls. And that was one of the things he told you in the book was, because you didn't have the internet was just coming up, right? 2001. And so I just got on the phone and started making phone calls. Went in the newspaper. That's where most of the listings were at that point. And found a real estate agent. She showed me a property, offered full price on it, which looking back today, I'm like, why would I offer full price on a property like that? But, it is what it is. bought that property, and then she talked me into getting my real estate license. She's like, I think you should get your real estate license. So I started selling real estate while I was investing for the first, I think, 2 years. And then, so bought the course in April of 2001, September, so 9/11, September 2001 is when I bought my first 2 properties back to back. And then I didn't buy any for several months. And then I partnered up with a guy that I went to high school with, and he inherited a little bit of money. So we took $60,000 they inherited. We'd buy a property, we'd fix it up, refinance it, buy another property, fix it up, refinance it, what's now called BRRRR. So I'd like to say I invented the BRRRR, but before it was a term. So we did that on like 10 properties. And all of a sudden we had like hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity in properties, and then, some cash flow from it. And so to this day, I use the same thing where we raise money from investors, we buy properties, we fix them up, and then we either sell them or we rent them out and refinance them, like I mentioned. So we've done over 1,000 of those deals over the last 20 plus years. It's been a fun ride. It's led to other things like the co-working space and venue space and some other businesses.
That's pretty wild. And I would not guess just by looking at you that you've been in real estate for 20 years. Like that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I'm curious from a real estate perspective, because you're coming at this from a little bit of a different angle than most of our guests. From a real estate perspective, how does a wedding venue stack up in terms of how passive or active it is to not only buy, create the opportunity? What was your evaluation of it in terms of a real estate play? Maybe not the business of wedding and events, but just kind of the real estate play of getting into a venue.
So I don't always recommend this for everybody, but I'm always someone that just kind of like jumps off a cliff and figures out how to build wings on the way down. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are that way. And so I just looked at it from a logical standpoint, and I said, if I spend X amount of dollars on this space, turn it in when I'm going to, I can take at that time until last year or till this year, you could take accelerated depreciation. So I could take out of the 1.5, I can't remember what the number was, we could basically write off $1.2 million in a couple different years, because we did one phase, we were able to write that off once we put it into use. Then we did a second phase and we're able to write the rest of it off. So I knew from a tax perspective, it's like I would really have to screw this up in order for it not to make money on the grand scheme of things. And then of course COVID hits and it kind of throws a little wrench in it. But from a standpoint of operating a venue, I'd never done it before. In fact, that's why I wanted to connect with you, is to talk more about the venue management part of it. And then the co-working side of it, I'm like, I've rented co-working spaces in San Diego because my team is in Wichita. And so they were always full. Like I always saw them full. And so I knew from that perspective that Wichita didn't have a very good co-working space, or very many. And if, they probably had one or two that were decent, but they weren't that big. This one's on Kellogg. It's a good size. It's got an event venue. There's so many different things that other co-working spaces don't have. And then from the venue side of it, there's no venue in Kansas, and Wichita, I should say, that's on a major highway and has all the parking that we have. So I'm like, there's got to be a way to make this work regardless. And so we just started building it out and figured it out on the way, along the way.
Got it. Very cool. I love what you said about kind of doing the thing and then building the wings as you start, falling as you jump out of the plane. So now take me through the actual venue journey. You're building it out, you've created it. What was the next step? Because you're not there in Wichita, you're doing all this remotely, correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty passive in most of my businesses. I'll meet with my teams once a week or so on the different businesses. And so I can't say that I've cracked the code on the venue by any means, but I do have a manager in place that manages that. And so we just go over numbers once a week. I meet with, we have a marketing company that helps us with our marketing. So I meet with them once a week to kind of look at our numbers, from a high level overview. And then just kind of manage it from afar, and they manage everything.
Hey there, wanted to take a quick break and share a little bit about Common Sense Events and the consulting services that we provide. In the past year, Common Sense Events has been able to partner with several venues and provide consulting services around everything from marketing, sales, and operations. We've worked with families, helping smooth out operational hiccups. We've worked with teams to help their marketing departments book more events, and we've worked with sales teams to make sure they're able to have higher converting tours. So if that sounds interesting to you, we would love to have a conversation about that. You can contact us at venues@cseventservices.com. You can also just reach out on the podcast and send us a DM if this is interesting to you. But we would love to talk with you and see if there's a way that we can partner with you and your venue and help make your venue run smoother. All right, back to the show.
How do you do that? I think a lot of us struggle with managing people in person, right? How do you manage remotely, and not like an hour remotely, but several hour flight? What is the flight?
Okay,
4 hours or something?
So I'll take you back to 2010.
Okay.
2010, I'd been in the business, 9 years at that time. And I went through like something that was like really rough. And what happened was I think it was like the third time I had let go of my staff. I had 4 people working for me. We were kind of like, on our way up, and I had to fire all 4 of them for different reasons: stealing, not showing up, whatever it was. All of a sudden I went from this business that I was building with these people to now I'm the business, right? And I had that happen so many times where I would make moves, I'd take a step forward, and I'd have to take a step back because of personnel and all that kind of stuff. And so I made a big shift, and I went to my sister, who ran another company for, I don't know, whatever it was, 10 years at that time. And I went to her and I said, okay, will you come on board? I'm sick of dealing with all this other crap from all these other people. Come help me build this business. And she looked at me and I told her my goals, and she said, I'll get you there. I said, great, let's go. And so that was 2010, changed my world. She came in, she automated a lot of different things. She, actually showed up, did her job. She did the job of probably 3 people, maybe even all 4 of those people that were in the company at that point. So that was my big first shift. And then I met someone who owned a real estate investing company that didn't look at houses, didn't manage their properties, was like pretty hands off. And I'm like, there's no way that can happen, right? I mean, if you like, and I still to this day, when I tell people I only work a few hours a week on my real estate investing business, they're like, how? And so it came out of necessity because I was so burnt out. I was like, I have to figure this out. I have to figure out how to automate this thing because I don't want to be in it. I don't really like this business that much, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I love seeing houses before and after. I love giving employees, great place to work. I love helping sellers. I love providing great properties to buyers, but all that stuff in between is just, it can really wear on you. And so from then I just started building out the team. I hired that coach to coach me through how to automate my business. And within 4 years, I was able to completely step out of the business, move to, as I mentioned to you, Tampa for a year, and then here to San Diego. And I've been pretty much hands off since then. And it's actually easier to manage the business from here than it is from there. Reason being is that when you manage it from afar, you can't be in the weeds, right? You can't meet with sellers, you can't meet with tenants, you can't go to properties and start nitpicking stuff. I just see the high level overview of everything that's going on in the business, and I can make decisions based on those high level things as opposed to all the little things that I don't need to know about or I don't want to know about, because those things will just clog your mind and get you really upset because they're not going the way you want them to, right?
Totally.
So my team will come to me for big issues like, man, we had a $5,000 HVAC unit go out, or we bought this property and there's a $10,000 foundation issue we didn't know about. Other than that, I see a contract in my inbox with the deal analyzer, the pictures, some basic information. Within 5 minutes, I can approve it and say, let's go. And my team may talk a little bit about it in between from when it's then and when it's done, but most of the time it's like, hey, we're finished with this property. Here's the pictures. Let's talk about pricing and put it on the market. So I spend probably 30 minutes, maybe an hour on each deal, and my team does the rest. So it's way easier managing it from afar than it is being in the weeds, if you have the right team, of course.
So I was going to ask, because someone has to do some of those things, right? Like someone has to, on your team, they have to get in the weeds with some of it. I mean, you can automate it, right? But then you can also hire someone, or do you just not do it? Like, what are the options, and who do you have doing those things? Is it all your team? Was it mostly automation? Like, what was the kind of the split between how many things you have automated and how many things you're delegating?
Yeah, so I think you have to look at it from a high level view and say, what are the different jobs? If I were to be out of the business, what are the different jobs or departments that I would have in order to step out? So for me, it's transaction coordination, it's property management, it's project management, it's marketing, it's acquisitions, and I'm probably missing something. So you have to look at all of that. And then you have to say, okay, can I hire, when you make your first hire, what can one person take on? Can they take on 2 of those roles or 3 of those roles? And then as time goes on, in my mind, I'm thinking at some point I'm going to have one person in each one of those roles. And once I got one person in each one of those roles, that's when I was able to say, okay, I have one person that's responsible for every department. And now they are the point person. They are responsible for all the stuff and the weeds in that certain department. And if something doesn't go right there, then they're the ones responsible. And then from then, you can just have KPIs in place of what everybody needs to be doing. And if they're not doing their job, you replace them with someone else. And at that point, you should be able to look at the high level, more of the business from more of a high level view. And the other thing that I had to do is hire at the time we called him a president. I guess some people would call him like an operations manager or a COO. That actually was there running the organization. So I had my sister who was the hub and ran a lot of the back end stuff, and then she had a supporting staff, and then I had a COO or president running the organization. So it takes time.
Yeah, I'm curious. Do you think, you said it takes time right there at the end. I'm curious how long, like if you had to go back and start from scratch, like scratch, right? How long does it take you to get back to that place where you would consider hiring the team? Because I heard you say KPIs, you had to have an awareness of what each role was responsible for before you delegated it. Is that correct?
For the most part, you have to know what the role is. You don't necessarily have to like build everything out. I think that's what some people struggle with, is they think they have to build out the whole role before they hire somebody. But if you just have a high level overview of what the role is, if you have the right person that comes in, they can help build out the role. You may have to build an outline, and you may have to have some systems in place. And it's great if you do, because then they can just come and plug in. But if you don't, I'm not afraid of hiring someone and saying, I don't have all this figured out, but I have some of it figured out. I'm going to give you what I have figured out, and along the way, we're going to figure out how to fill the rest in, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's more about having the right people in place than it is having the perfect system in place, because if you have the right people that come in, they're going to build a system for you.
Totally. That people and process thing has been something that we've struggled with, definitely, at different points in the business. And I think venue owners, venue operators, people in any sort of business, whether it's creative, like a lot in the event space, or if it's, anything else, there's definitely that, like identifying the right person, but then identifying the process that can, produce those results that you want. Let's talk about the people though. How long did it take you to identify a good person, like someone you wanted working for your team? Were there certain traits you started picking out? What was the learning curve like to start hiring better and better people that actually allowed you to free up your time?
Well, first of all, my sister, she is the epitome of what I'd say a great employee. So if I looked at her resume back then, which I don't even think I looked at her resume because I obviously knew her, but
was she older?
She is 4 years older than me, I believe.
Okay.
And so she had been with her company for previous company, at least 10 years. I want to say it was closer to 15, but it was at least 10 years. And she had results. Like, she ran that company. Like, she wasn't like high up. She was just more like a hub where everybody could go to her for orders and all that kind of stuff. She was like the back end hub of that whole business. And so those are the 2 of the 3 things that I look for is how long have they been at other jobs? What have the results been in other jobs? And then do they fit in our culture? Because if they don't fit in our culture of what we believe in, then they're not going to fit in. They're going to stick out like a sore thumb. And so looking at that, if I want to hire someone that's in a mid-level or higher position, that's what I need, is someone that's been at a job for a long time, they have results, and they fit in our culture. Now you have some positions like we're hiring for a front desk position at our workspace. So you're not going to have someone that's 10 years at the same business as a front desk person. It just doesn't happen. So that you have to kind of give into a little bit. But I think back when I was hiring people, I think I would hire out of fear that if I didn't hire someone now, that I would have to do that responsibility or that job for a longer period of time. And I looked at it as, okay, oh, wow, you can fill this role. I want to get this off my plate as quickly as possible. That's not the right way to do it, because what happens is they'll take it off your plate for a little bit, but then you got to go and start the process all over again. And not to mention, when you hire the right person, they're just going to create a big headache. Like I mentioned, those 4 people that I let go, one was stealing. Actually, 3 were living in my properties. Which tells you the kind of people they are, because they would come to me for help, like, man, I can't, whatever. And I would be like, okay, you can stay in one of my properties and just pay rent. One, he was like, man, you have this house here that needs to be fixed up. I'll fix this house for you. You don't have to, I'm not going to pay your rent, but I'll fix up the house. Moves in, doesn't do any work to it. And then, just all those kinds of war stories. So now it's really taking our time to hire the right person. I've actually,
can I ask you a question really quick on that?
Yeah.
Because that is a trait that I've seen. Like it sounds like you were trying to be helpful. You were trying to, you were giving someone a place to live. You were being willing to trade for something. Like, in concept, it really works, right? But it didn't play out. Would you ever recommend anyone ever consider creative solutions like that? Or have you just seen those usually work in a bad way?
No, there's 2 big things that I look for now. One is if someone asks for something in the beginning, and when I say in the beginning, like the first 6 months, that's a red flag to me. It's, I need an advance in pay. I need to take a bunch of time off for XYZ. People show themselves who they are pretty quickly, right? And so you want to help people, and you want to be empathetic, sympathetic, whatever you want to call it, to them and help them out, but you have to draw a line somewhere. If someone's been, like I actually have virtual assistants in the Philippines. I had one, she's been with me at least 3 years now. And about 1.5 years ago, her son got sick. And in the Philippines, what they'll do is they'll treat you, but then they won't let you go until you pay your bill. And so she had her son in the hospital, and he could not get out until she paid her bill, which was like $4,000 US, which is a lot of money for them.
Yeah.
And she'd been with me 1.5 years, super loyal, all that kind of stuff. So I loaned her the money. Mm-hmm. But I did that because she proved herself over 1.5 years, and she was in a situation that it was totally against that she couldn't help, right?
Yeah.
Her son got sick, I had to treat him, and I felt really bad. And I thought, if I lose $4,500 at that point, I helped her get her son out. I kind of looked at it that way. 1.5 years later, she's still with me. I think almost 2 years later. So there's situations like that you have to look at. But when it's like they just started working for you and they start asking for a bunch of stuff, they need a place to stay, it's just a recipe for disaster. The other thing was, what was the other thing? Oh, recommending their siblings.
Okay.
I've had the guy that I told you that moved in that was doing work, his brother had worked for me, and he recommended him to come work for me. And then he was the one that wanted to move in and do work. And then I had to end up firing both of them. Had the same thing happen with 2 other brothers. One brother came on board and said, hey, my brother needs work. And I brought him on board, and that didn't work either. So I'm very cautious about that. If someone's on working for me for a good while, and then they bring their sibling in, that's one thing. But in the first 6 months, they're like, hey, my brother or sister needs a job. It's like, nah, you need to prove yourself for a while before I start hiring other family members.
That's so practical, such great advice. And I feel like in the venue space, there's so many, ways to cross-apply this. Because, you'll have people, if you're going to hire a coordinator, you're going to hire a venue manager or something like that. Oh, my brother, my sister, my cousin, whoever it is. And so it is very easy as a venue operator, venue owner to just be like, oh, path of least resistance, right? And just pursue that. But this is super helpful. So now let's talk a little bit more about the venue. I want to go back and talk about kind of how you manage remotely and a little bit more of that at the end here. But
let's talk about Venue 54 is what it's called, right? In Wichita, Kansas. Can you describe the building a little bit? I know you've described the co-working. It's a big commercial building. There's co-working on one side of it. You've got plenty of parking, but what do people get when they rent the property in terms of, hey, I want to get married here? Tables and chairs? Is it catering in-house? Give me some of those details.
Well, here's the interesting thing is I'll probably have you dig into it a little bit, and you'll probably be like, there's a lot of things maybe you're not doing right. So we've just kind of done this on our own, right? We haven't consulted. We haven't hired anybody outside. And so what I noticed with other venues is that they kind of nickel and dime you for everything. And if it works, it works, I guess. But for me, it's like I wanted to create something that like they get one price and then it comes with everything. I say everything. Obviously, there's some things that they may ask for, like linens and some extras that we may charge for. But we give them the AV equipment, the TV if they need it, tables and chairs, and then if they want to add linens and the other decorations and stuff like that, obviously they need to pay for it. And just so you know, it's not just a wedding venue, but it's also for other things. Business conferences, seminars. People use it for birthday parties. There's all kinds of other different events that people use it for. And I think we may have underpriced ourselves, and maybe that's one of the reasons that we had some issues that we had. We had some lower quality people in a couple events that kind of made a big difference in like reviews and stuff like that. But yeah, we're still figuring it out. We don't have it all figured out, but we're definitely getting there. So it sounds like they do get tables and chairs. They get access to the space. Is it like a full day rental, or are you doing multiple events a day? We do. So we have two spaces. We have one space that holds about 150 people. So it's not a very big space. And then we have another one that holds about 75. And then we have 2 acres on the back that we're going to start maybe having tents set up and things of that nature. And we just built a patio on the back of our venue. So you can open up the garage doors and there's a nice little patio where people can congregate and all that kind of stuff. So it's evolving into something bigger and better. But yeah, we have those two spaces and they get the whole space. We don't have an event coordinator. They can hire, and that's the other thing. They can hire their own event coordinator. They can bring in their own food. They can bring in all the other stuff that they want to bring in, and that allows more flexibility for them, and usually saves them quite a bit of money doing that. Yeah.
Pardon the interruption, I wanted to take a moment and share with you about WEVA. WEVA stands for Wedding and Event Venue Association, and it is a professional association custom built for venue owners and operators. We felt like there was a lack of resources, community, education, and networking available specifically for our industry, and so we recently started this association, and it's been growing by the day. We would love to extend an invite to you, so please click the link in the description or wherever you're watching this video, and we would love to welcome you into the community.
It sounds like a pretty traditional blank canvas model in terms of allowing people to come in, do their thing with the space. Most hands-off option, but still allows plenty of, customization. I've been talking recently about a 2x2 matrix with the 2 variables being, convenience and creativity. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to another podcast guest about this who had a consulting background, and just kind of understanding the more convenient it is for someone, the less creativity they might have. That might be one of those hotels type situations. But the blank canvas is a beautiful way to kind of give that creativity to someone at a great price.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get too much in the weeds with you about kind of the actual specifics of the venue, but I'm curious on the finance side of it. So how do you determine from a financial and kind of real estate perspective if you are going to overbuild or overinvest in the building? Because it sounds like you have 2 acres. You could probably build an outdoor pavilion. You could spend a lot of money, and the return wouldn't necessarily be there from a financial standpoint. So what things are you thinking about to help you analyze, is this a good, profitable investment from a real estate and financial perspective?
Good question. So 2 years ago, I started planning another 18,000 square feet on that 2 acres. So we were going to build 2 buildings, and we were going to do flex space, which is basically like a garage door where you could go in and have a truck and tools and all that kind of stuff. But then there's another door that goes into an office. And that is very high demand, and I know would have rented very quickly and easily. And when we ran the numbers on it, it made sense. But then building supplies went up, interest rates went up, and just with the building supplies itself, before the interest rates went up, it didn't make sense. And then interest rates went up, and it totally didn't make sense. So now we've kind of pivoted our mind to how can we build something out there that is low cost but good return. So putting a tent out there, like a big white tent, is one idea. Putting shipping containers out there is another idea, so that we could just rent out the shipping containers. We've even thought about putting a couple pickleball courts out there with a tent, so that way it's like you could do it for parties and stuff like that. I honestly don't focus enough on that business and that kind of those kinds of things, just because we have so many other things going on. But now that we're talking about it again, I definitely need to get on it. But I think there's a lot of opportunity there. It all comes down to putting the money in, or are you going to get money out and get a good investment on it? But basically what it comes down to. And so far we haven't been able to find something that makes sense, but I'm sure we'll get there.
Yeah. Does the strategy change at all? And if so, how? When you have a situation where your prices are maybe a little bit lower, but your interest rates might be a little bit higher. Say, for example, someone who's looking to buy a venue today, in today's market, where, interest rates might be higher, the economy is what it is, and they're looking at buying either land and building and dealing with increased supply of, expense or materials and all that, or, buying an existing building that they may have to rehab in some way.
Yeah.
How are you, again, from a financial and real estate perspective, how would you be analyzing a deal like that?
So if I were an operator and I said, am I going to go buy a building, or am I going to go lease a building? Leasing a building is obviously going to be much more simple. The landlord will probably do the improvements, or it'll be a combination between you and the landlord. Or the space may already be ready for a venue. Maybe it was a previous venue. You just need to paint it, put your logos on it, and it's very simple, that kind of thing. The thing I like about the real estate play is that there's so many other advantages of it. You get the depreciation, right? So even if you don't improve the building, you still get to depreciate the building when you buy it. Your payments are probably going to be lower. You're going to have more of an investment up front, because you're going to have the down payment, the 20 to 30% the bank requires. You have something long-term, so you can't have somebody that tries to raise the lease on you or force you out, or want it back for their own use or something of that nature. And if there is land, or if there's something else with it where you can improve it, then you have that option to be able to do that. Whereas if you're renting, you don't have that option. Especially if you're renting, you don't want to put too much money into it, because then if you have to leave in 5 years, unless you get like a 10-year lease, then that money may be out the door when you leave.
And Tony, could you break that down just a little bit more? So the difference between leasing, like if someone were to go lease a building to create a venue, versus renting a building for 5 years. So renting for 5 versus leasing for what, 15 years, 10 years? Is there kind of a benchmark around what leases typically are?
You're saying a 5-year lease to a 15-year lease?
No, I'm just saying, what would be like if someone was going to rent a building to do events in versus leasing a building for events? What do those two different scenarios look like in terms of the duration of use of the building?
You mean buying compared to leasing?
Correct.
So I'll just throw some numbers out off the top of my head. Let's say you buy a venue, like a building, for $500,000. That building is going to, let's see, you'll put 20% down, so you probably have $100,000 down plus costs and all that kind of stuff. Your payment is going to be, let's call it $3,000 a month. And that the $500,000, I would say about 90% of it you can depreciate over a period of time. For commercial, it's 39 years. So you can write off basically 2.5%, I think it's a little more than 2.5% of the building every year as a tax deduction. On top of that, you get the depreciation and you're paying the mortgage down, right? If you just lease it, you're probably going to pay, I don't know, maybe $4,000 a month, let's say $4,000 to $5,000 a month. So your payment is going to be higher. You're not going to get the appreciation, you're not going to get the mortgage pay down, and you're not going to get the depreciation on the property for tax reasons. So there's a lot of benefits of owning the building, which I would recommend if someone could financially afford it. But if someone wants less risk, then obviously leasing is going to be the way to go. And then the other thing is, if it doesn't work out and the building has value, as opposed to having, let's say after a year, the venue doesn't work out for some reason, you have 4 years left on the lease. Whereas if you own it, at least you could put it on the market and sell it and hopefully recoup some or some, maybe all of your money, depending on if it appreciated or not.
Very interesting. So if you have the finances, so when you buy it, you said you're carrying the risk, right? If you buy it, but you have the potential upside of the appreciation, some of those other things you mentioned, what's the risk there? Like what would you be evaluating as the risk?
So the risk would be the market going down and the value of the property going down. Interest rates going up. So we're actually getting ready to hit our 5-year mark on our loan. So our interest rate's going from 4.5% to 7 to 7.5%. So there's that risk there. With lease, you have the same thing though. Leases can go up after 5 years. Something major, I mentioned the contractor issue. I mean, there's some big money that can be put into the property if HVAC fails or property floods or something of that nature. If a storm happens, you have insurance, so that shouldn't be that much of a risk. But there could be some reason that insurance doesn't cover it. Vandalism, we had. You may still actually be responsible for parties and things like that if you're renting it from somebody else. But we've had some damage to the property. I guess either way, we would have had to by taking care of it. But I think the upside is probably more than the downside of owning a building. I'd say with the economy we're in right now, which is still fairly stable, but things can happen, I would say just make sure you buy it right. And I think there's going to be some opportunities for good commercial properties because, multiple things. People are still going more online, so there's still some retailers that are going out of business. But the other thing is that people's interest rates are going to have to start resetting. And when interest rates reset and they go from 4% to 7.5%, that's going to force some people to either have to sell or maybe even foreclose on the property if they can't sell it. So there are probably going to be some deals in the next couple of years.
Are there things that you look for in terms of, let's say you were going to buy a venue again? Are there things that you look for in a property, kind of some absolute don't do's, stay aways? Where's your buy box in terms of when you think about a venue?
That's a great question. I think buying the right size. So it goes both ways. So for
Buying the right size?
Buying the right size. Square footage
Okay.
size, yeah. So that big building, looking back, I don't know if I would have done a co-working office and venue space that big. I probably would have divided it up a little bit more so that, because we had to basically fill 14,000 square feet. I mean, that's a lot of square footage to fill. So I think finding the right size. So the venue space we have, the downfall to it is you only have 150 people that you can fit in that venue. We have inquiries quite a bit where they're like, I need 200 people, I need 300 people. And I think you can charge a pretty good amount of money for that because venues don't always hold that many people. So it goes both ways. You don't want to get too big or too small, but you also need to, I guess, look at your competition and see what's out there. Since we opened up 3 years ago, there's been a lot of competition that's come, but then there's some that's gone away because of COVID and all of that. But looking at your competition, if there's a ton of 300 square foot venues, there's not a lot of 100 or 300 guest venues, but there's not a lot of 150 guest venues, 150 person venues. You might want a 150 person venue. You may not want a 300 person venue because it may be too big because there's too much competition there. So there's a lot of variables to look at, and we're right on a major highway, which makes it very attractive, and we have a lot of parking. So there's a lot of advantages there. We have over other co-working spaces. I guess it's going to be really specific to how much you want to spend, what the competition is, and what you feel like the demand is for the venue.
That makes a lot of sense. When I think about, because with what we do as a management company, I think about a lot about how the owner purchased the building. Because basically, if we come in and insert the percentage fee that we take to manage the property, a lot of times if the owner has overbuilt, or it's, let's put a scenario out there. The monthly payment is $50,000 a month on the building, and it's a beautiful building, whatever. We come in there, they need to find a way, they want to cash flow it, let's say. Well, that means that we not only have to cover the $50,000 mortgage, but then we also need to cover operational expenses, and we also have to cover, marketing, everything else, and then our cut. So then we're looking at really like 80, 90, 100,000, something like that.
Yeah.
And maybe you do that year 2, year 3, but depending on the type of venue you are, if you don't want to have 100 venues or 100 weddings per year, right, then you start kind of backing off the numbers and saying, okay, what does each wedding have to cost? And then can this area support that? Things like that. When you are looking at commercial real estate specifically, and let's just take venues because we're here talking about venues, is there a length of time that you're kind of forecasting the amount of money over? Like, are these commercial deals for you buy and kind of hold forever? Or are these because of the depreciation and because of the mortgage pay down, it's because of some of those things? Or are these like, let's fill them up? And I don't know if this is your strategy, but I'm saying, what would your strategy be? Let's fill them up and then let's sell them to someone else.
Yeah. So
it's kind of a long question, but
yeah. I'm trying to figure out how to wrap that all into a good answer. So, what would be the first thing you want me to answer there?
Yeah. So in terms of how you would analyze a commercial real estate deal that is for a venue, would you want to go in and you would say, okay, let's buy or build this. Let's fill it full of venues. Let's get the business humming. Let's get, all the pieces in place, and then let's go and sell it and offload it. Would that be the strategy? Or would the strategy be buy it, and then just hold it for 40, 50?
Oh gosh, there's so many different ways you can do it. I mean, you could buy the building, occupy it, hold it long term. You could buy the building, occupy it, have your venue company lease the building, and then sell the building to someone else. Or even vice versa, keep the building, sell the venue to somebody else. It all depends on what you want to do. I just know that from a real estate standpoint, if you can make the number, like for me, the numbers worked because I bought the building cheap enough. I put enough in the renovations that I was able to write that off, but then I was able to refinance the property and get a lot of that money back. So I if we would have been on budget, I would have been zero invested, but because it went over budget, not as much. But it all depends on what strategy you want. I imagine those who are watching this and that are running venues are probably those that want to buy the venue, renovate it, whether that's just a little paint or a total remodel, and then they want to keep it long-term to operate their venue. But at the same time, if they feel like the venue has appreciated enough in value and they just want to get the money out and then somewhat lessen their risk of not having to own the building and just make a lease payment to the whoever buys it, I mean, that's another option too. And, you can make good money from that. And you own it long enough, then you can 1031 exchange that money into another building, so there's maybe another opportunity to take that and put it into another building where they could run a venue and then just continue to do that.
That's super interesting. That's a really cool breakdown. And I'm really excited and grateful that you were willing to come today and chat about this, because we don't often talk to people who are approaching it with this mindset, right? A lot of times it is people who are renovating a family barn, into something that's going to be a venue. And they're really focused on the venue supporting the business, right? The building supporting the business. So this is a cool opportunity to kind of look at it from a different angle and say, okay, what are the commercial real estate pieces that need to be in play? I want to wrap today asking you one more question about the way that you manage your team, how you structure your time to be most effective. You said that you don't want to get in the weeds, right? You said you put these people in place in each one of the kind of centers. You kind of said you had a couple, right? How do you know what you should be looking at and where you should be spending your time so that you're not micromanaging them, but you're still providing enough accountability so that the needle's not shifting?
Great question. There's a fine line there somewhere, because I have a lot of stuff automated and there's a lot of stuff I don't know in my business. But then sometimes I'll get into checking on things a little bit too much. But sometimes it's valid though, because I'll be like, well, what happened with this? We were supposed to do this a couple weeks ago. And they're like, oh, we forgot. And it's like, well, if I would have just trusted them to do it 100%, it may not have happened. And some of the things are small, but some of the things are big. Like we had on our co-working space, we had a long message that I recorded at the very beginning, at the beginning that says, press 1 for this, 2 for this, and, kind of a little sales pitch. And we found out that people were kind of like hanging up. And so they told me that, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to record a voicemail at the end. So now it'll ring, and if it doesn't answer, then the voicemail comes. Well, I didn't check on it, which I guess is kind of the other way around of what I'm talking about. But that message, like 6 months later, was still there. And I'm like, we were supposed to change that. So there's kind of, there's ebbs and flows of like trust and, and there's also fine lines between micromanaging. For me, I try and put as many systems in place to make sure that things are done, whether it's checklists or project. Like I put together a project for my team today. It would take me a lot of time to do this project. It just took me 5 minutes to put the outline together. I explained it to them, gave it to them, and now I have something to check up on. So they're supposed to get it done by Friday of next week. I can look at that checklist and say, hey guys, give me a breakdown. Did you get all this get done? And hopefully within 15 minutes, they can explain whether it was done or not. I break my time up into chunks. So like I have meetings with my marketing team. I have meetings with my flipping team. I have a media company, 10X TV, that I haven't even mentioned or talked about. We do TV commercials for businesses.
That's awesome.
And so I try and have meetings with those different departments once a week to go over the main points. Last week we talked about this. Did this get done? Okay, what is our agenda for the next week? Usually anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, and that's kind of how I break things out. And then for my time, I do the same thing with projects. I just break my time out into projects that I need to put on my calendar and do. If you organize your time right, you can get a lot done in 40 hours. Because I used to work 80-hour weeks, and I get way more done in 40 hours than I used to in 80 hours.
That's huge. That's such great advice. And for anyone in the wedding and event space, like you're talking 80, 100 hours, especially if you're doing all the jobs. And that's something you don't have to do, but a lot of people, that's where they start. Just to wrap all of this up. So 10X TV, the flipping business, the venue, co-working, there's all these different things you've got going on. Do you enjoy that, having a bunch of different things going on? Like a bunch of different businesses?
Yeah, that's a mixed question, or not a mixed question, but a lot of different thoughts to go through my head. So first of all, it's hard for me to focus on one thing for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was in one business and that's it, I get really bored. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the reason that I created the other companies. But no, I love having multiple businesses, and it's great because if something happens to one business, then I've got other businesses to cover it, right? There's opportunities, right? If I would have just stayed in my flipping company, yes, I could do very well in that. But this media company is doing, just rough numbers, probably 4 to 5 times what my flipping company's doing. And I started it 2.5 years ago.
Wow.
Right. And so there's so many opportunities out there. And I caution by saying that because for the first 10 to 15 years, I got my eyes off my flipping company and started so many other things that just didn't work out, whether it was multi-level marketing or, whatever it was. We started a maintenance company. All kinds of random things. So my final say on that would be is if you're going to do other things, get the one thing dialed in to where if you leave it, it's not going to waver if you're not there. Because a lot of people do that. And I did that many times where I took my eye off of it. I didn't optimize my one business. I started going over here, and it didn't necessarily go down or under, but it wasn't nearly what it was with me concentrating my time for several months trying to try other things. But I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'll probably start other businesses. Actually, I think my wife says I need to stop starting businesses. And I said, okay, I'll start buying businesses. So it's very cool. It's the next transition.
Having some businesses that are maybe already running that you're just doing the opposite.
Totally. The startup phase is the worst part of it because there's so much uncertainty. But if you can find something that's already been proven out, and with experience, now I've got experience in marketing and sales and human resources and systems. And I've got teams that can go into those businesses if I need to and optimize them as opposed to me having to spend a lot of time in them. So I'm pretty excited about that. I think I'll probably wait till next year to dive into that, but that's something I'm excited to get into.
That's awesome. Well, just for the sake of time, we could talk for probably 3 hours and have one of those Joe Rogan style podcasts, but I really appreciate you coming on today and chatting a bit about the processes, the systems you have in place, your teams, kind of how you've woven real estate investing into venues. And so this has been awesome. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm curious, before we wrap, where is the best place if people want to reach out to you and ask about flipping or ask about any of these things, or even maybe are interested in any of the stuff that you have going on? What's the best place to connect with you?
Probably the easiest thing would be two ways, TonyJavier.com, TonyJavier.com, and then my Instagram, TonyJavier.tv. Either of those places you can kind of see what I do and connect with me.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks so much, Tony. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate you.
You got it.
Hey friends, Jonathan here. Just want to take a moment and share about Common Sense Events consulting packages. We are really excited to be consulting with a few more companies this year, and we've done it in the past successfully, and it's been such a blast. So this year, we want to take on a couple more consulting clients. Unfortunately, because of the venues that we currently manage and the intention and the focus that we have on that, we're only able to take on a limited amount, but we do have a couple slots for venues. So if you are interested, we have both 90 and 120-day programs available, or we can come in and partner with you on marketing, sales, operations, and help fine-tune any of the systems that are in those categories. So if you're interested in that, we would absolutely love to hear from you and see if there's a way that we could partner with you and serve you at your venue. Go ahead, fill out the link that is in the description in this video or podcast. You can also just send us an email at venues@cseventservices.com, and we'd love to chat with you. All right, back to the show.